Over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to explain how organizational rewilding fits into the exit planning process. And I'm going to use this analogy that we find to be helpful to compare it to selling a house. And you'll see kind of where I'm going with that. I think that's helpful. We'll also introduce to you the organizational rewilding system. That's our business growth system. And we want to share some information out of that so that you can be familiar with it. You're not going to end up being experts today on it, but it'll give you enough understanding just to kind of see how it works. And we'll point you to other resources if you want to go more deeply into that. And then finally, we're going to show how organizational rewilding multiplies the business value. We'll show you an example and just conceptually how it's changing the narrative and some key levers within an organization to increase its value. In case I didn't get to meet you when I spoke at the BEI event this past summer, just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Matthew Pohl, and I'm the founder and CEO of the ReWild Group. Our headquarters are in Denver, Colorado, and around 8 years ago, I owned a business that had been oscillating between what we call stage 1 and stage 2. And had been stuck in that range for about a dozen years. It was at that time I stumbled on this growth methodology that I'm going to share with you today. It had been invented by someone else, and I was the beneficiary of it. The impact of this methodology was immediate and noticeable. And in 3 short years, our business that had been stuck for over a decade, in those 3 years, we tripled in revenue, number of people. And in fact, I went from being a burnt out CEO to falling back in love with my business again. It was at that time that we were approached by one of our major competitors, and we ended up selling that business. And it was interesting. We had it valued at year 12. We sold at year 15. And there was a 10x difference between those 3 years in the business valuation. So it made a huge impact on that exit for me as a business owner. After leaving that business, I wanted other business owners to have that same kind of experience, to really reap the rewards of taking risk and working hard. And so I acquired the IP that had helped me so much, all the research and the methodology, and have been working the last several years to turn it into a business growth system that's now being used throughout the globe for small and mid-sized businesses. And so I'm really excited to share the system with you today and show you how it quickly accelerates business value. I'd like everyone to get involved by participating in our first poll. So we'll go ahead and put that up on the screen. And there should be a pop-up. Again, if you can just kind of read the question. We're asking you to select the increase in business value that your clients are typically wanting to see before exiting their business. So what's the most common response to how much do I want my business to be improved from a valuation standpoint? We'll give just another few seconds here. About over half of the people have responded so far. And again, I'm sure you hear a range of answers there, but what do you see as the most frequent, the most typical response to, well, how much do you want your business to increase? Okay, it looks like we have most people in there. I'm going to go ahead and close out that poll and share the results with you. So hopefully you're seeing this, the question and the answers that came in. And what you'll see is that the most common goal for a business owner as they're looking to exit is to see a noticeable increase, somewhere between a 25 to 50% increase before they exit. There's some moderate increases and some significant increases. And those all seem kind of in a relatively, I would say, reasonable hope or desire, from 10% up to 100%. And so that's what your clients are telling you today when they're starting the exit process, is they want some increase in their value up to a pretty significant increase. And that's kind of what we see in the marketplace in general. So thanks for participating on that. Let's go into what should be a common reference here. And I wanted to really connect our methodology to this familiar framework for those of you that are active in the BEI methodology. So in this methodology, step 3 deals with growing business value. And while every one of these 7 steps is important in the exit planning process, the reality is that significantly increasing the value of your client's business over a relatively short period of time can make this one of the most impactful steps of this process. If you could actually achieve those desires of 25, 50, 100% increase in the value, that exit becomes totally different for that particular business owner. And this is where organizational rewilding fits into the exit planning process. It's in that step 3. So now that you see kind of just where it fits into that familiar framework, I want to use this concept or this analogy of selling a home and how this relates to selling a business and where organizational rewilding fits into that story. I like to use this analogy because all of us probably have sold a home, right? So it's something we're familiar with. And so it's easy for us to draw some parallels between that and selling a business. Many of us have never sold a business. So when a homeowner puts their house up on the market, they have basically 4 approaches to preparing that property for sale. First, they can sell it as is, right? This is basically, they put it on the market on Saturday, and on Friday, maybe they do a little cleaning. They do some very basic stuff, throw away the trash. It looks like the house that they've been living in for however many years. That's option 1. Option 2 is to touch up the house. This takes the as is and does a little bit more. Maybe you fill up the nail holes in the walls, do a little touch-up painting, maybe clean the carpets. It's still the same house that you've been living in. It's probably cleaner than it's been for a while, but it's fundamentally the same house. The third option is to stage the home. And when we stage a home, we're actually trying to change the look of it from it being lived in, right? So we are decluttering, we are painting the interior, we might paint the exterior, we may bring in like new furniture to replace the used furniture that we've been using as we've lived there. Maybe we take care of all the landscaping stuff that, the dead bushes and stuff that have been there for a while. What results from staging is it's the same house, but it's in better shape than it has been since you moved in. It's a best version of the same house. The final option is to remodel the house. And remodeling is really the idea of changing the nature of that home. Maybe you're finishing the business to create more usable square footage. Maybe you add a level or put on a sunroom. You install a pool to make it more attractive outside during the summer. Maybe you extend the garage so there's more garage spaces to handle more vehicles. But the bottom line is after you've remodeled this home, it's in a different state than it has been, right? It's not the same property. It's a much better property than the one you've been living in. So we use this analogy to say there's basically the same 4 ways that you can put a business on the market, just like this house that you're putting on the market. Same thing, you can put your business as is, you can and that's the business as it's running. You can touch it up by getting the financials cleaned up, maybe putting together some due diligence documents, writing up information about the business. You can stage the business, and you can also remodel that business. And it's really on these last 2 that organizational rewilding fits into the story. We help you stage a business or remodel a business. We make it the best looking version of what it is, or we create it, we transform it so it's actually a better version than it's been in the past. It's a different business. And that's really where, like I said, organizational rewilding fits in. Because when you get up to these last stages, in fact, as you move across this continuum here, a couple things happen. The value of the business starts to increase. But not only that, the probability that it'll actually sell increases as well. Because I know you're familiar with the statistics that very few businesses that are put on the market actually close. And so I'm sure that's part of your incentive to and your client's incentive to work with you as an exit planner is to be one of those that actually sells as opposed to gets put on the market and you get no offers or no offers that you can really accept. Okay, so our process is not for everybody. It's for people, business owners who want to stage or remodel their business, who want to make the business the best version of it kind of in its current structure, or change the structure of it so it's actually a better business. And that takes some time. And not every business owner is willing to put in the time. So when we look at candidates for organizational rewilding, we see four criteria for that. The first is that the business owner has to be motivated to increase the value. When I say motivated, this isn't, well, it'd be nice to have more. It'd be great that it would be valued at a higher amount. This is somebody who actually is saying, okay, I want to make this happen, because it's not going to happen without that motivation. The second component is that they have to be committed to be working on their business. And this is not a week or two. This is over time. So at least 9 months, up to 2 years. It takes some time to right the ship, to make that staging and the remodeling actually take place. These businesses have often been in existence for decades. It can't be changed overnight. So you have to have that commitment. A key part of this, though, is that the CEO has to be open to new ideas. The business owner has to be willing to hear things from outside and to adopt those into their mindset and latch onto those. And then finally, they're going to have to rally the organization. It's not enough for the business owner to be bought in. They have to be able to get the buy-in of the organization, because the increase in value of the organization doesn't come from transforming the leader who's going to sell the business, is not going to be part of it anymore. It's really about transforming the organization so that when that leader, that owner leaves through the exit process, that the organization still has enduring value, has transferable value for the next owner. That's really what we're working on. So it's fundamental that the organization is bought into this process as well. Okay, with those criteria in mind and kind of that story or analogy as a point of reference, I'd like us to open up our second poll. Here we're saying, what is the length of time that your clients are typically willing to work on their business prior to the exit? Again, I know you're going to get a range of stories, but what's the most common that you see from clients when you say, well, how are you willing to work on your business? How long would you be willing to work on your business to try to increase its value? Okay, we've got more than half of the people have submitted. We'll wait just a few more seconds to keep that open. I don't want to spoil or skew the results, so go ahead and submit your answer. I'm going to close it here just in a second now. Okay, we've got quite a few of you that have submitted that, and let me go ahead and share the results. Okay, so here's what you guys are seeing from the marketplace, is that 70%, 75% of business owners are willing to work between 6 months to 24 months working on their business prior to exit. And so this is a good, that's great. That's kind of the sweet spot. 6 months is probably a little bit short, but if they're willing to kind of get going, and my guess is they see that there's progress being made, that 9-month mark is not too far off. And if we add in more than 24 months, we're actually at the vast majority of people. So that's great to see. I was curious what you guys see in the marketplace. That's not something I have personal exposure to. So this is really interesting to see. Good thing. Okay. Okay, so now that you see where the system fits into the exit process, and we have this story of selling a house, you can put it up 4 ways. Selling a business is kind of those same 4 conditions you can sell your business. And you see that organizational rewilding really fits in that staging or the remodeling strategy for exiting the business. Let's go into some details about organizational rewilding. Today, we're not going to go into a great deal of detail, but we're going to point you to some resources where you can get more information. But my goal today was just really to expose you to the key principles so that you can see, okay, that makes sense. I can see how that can help a business. And then in our last topic, we'll show you how it actually impacts the value. So there's really 3 reasons, kind of foundational reasons, why organizational rewilding really works, how it increases the value of a business. The first is it's based on research and observation that spans 3 decades and more than 1,500 small and mid-sized businesses across dozens of industries. And the specific purpose of this research was identifying why some businesses successfully navigate growth, others stall, and still others fail altogether. And so it's based on this research that covers a wide range and large number of businesses. And because of the breadth of that research, it's not just a single instance of success. This isn't Matt Pohl's way that he was successful in selling his business. It's not that. Now, this methodology helped me do it, but I was just the benefactor of the methodology. And so the stage of growth is born out of this collective experience of all these companies, the good and the bad, the successful and the fails. And this means that the lessons that we've learned from this research are consistent, they're repeatable, and they work. And they work regardless of the personality at the helm or the timing or all these success factors that seem so elusive that you can't control. This really focuses on the things that you can control. And finally, the third piece of why organizational rewilding works and why it's so powerful is that it grows with the business. This is not focused on kind of a one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, it helps business leaders understand that there are inflection points along this growth journey, and it gives businesses what they need today. So it shows where you are today, but it also grows with you. And that's why you'll see immediate benefit in businesses, but it can stick and continue to benefit that business even beyond that. And I would even suggest that it can provide value to that organization beyond the exit of its current owner, that the new owner can continue along with the stage of growth methodology to continue to get the growth that we've started and initiated using the system. As we did the research, it was easy to get distracted by all the things that make a business unique. Like the products it sells, the customers it serves, where the business is located. But when we stripped away all those variables and focused on one thing, the number of employees in an organization, something really remarkable happened. Patterns started to form. The major challenges we saw that face 2 companies that both have 30 employees were the same, regardless if one was in landscaping, another one was in software development. It was really this factor that correlated the highest to what was going on in the organization. And so the key finding in our research is that the number of employees in a company are the biggest driver of complexity. And it's the level of complexity that it generates and determines the rules for growth. So it's not revenue. That's a common one, and that's not a bad one, but it's not as correlated to this kind of concept, because revenue can be generated with fewer employees in some industries and many employees in other industries, and that's not the great barometer. It's really the number of employees. Excuse me. So what we found then was that there are 7 distinct stages of growth that are based on these ranges of complexity. And so these 7 levels of complexity represent this specific range of employees that are demonstrated on this graphic, okay? So I do want to point out that you might say, well, how do we know a stage of growth? And one of the links on the exit planning page is to a calculator. We'll put a link to that here in the chat as well. But you or your client can go and do this online calculator to determine the specific stage of growth that the business is in. In addition to these 7 stages, our research identified 8 areas of rules. We call these dimensions, and we call them dimensions because, like the different facets of a gem, not each facet of a gem tells the whole story, but it tells an important part of it. And when you look at it in its entirety, you get the full picture. So each of these dimensions has rules associated with it. And when we combine these areas of rules, 8 of them, and the 7 stages of growth, we get this matrix. And this matrix is the roadmap. It tells you for your particular stage how you need to behave, the best practices for that stage. And what's powerful is that it not only tells you where you are, so here in stage 3, here are the rules of growth, you're able to reflect on the prior stages and see potentially what you've missed. But maybe even more powerful, especially if you're trying to grow your organization, is knowing what comes next. It actually predicts when the change is going to happen and how the organization needs to change along with it. And this is why most businesses get stuck. They get misaligned with these rules of growth. And now I want to make it clear that if you violate these rules, it doesn't mean that you can't grow, but it means that growth is much more difficult. And the analogy I use is here in Colorado, I like to hike, climb mountain peaks. We call them 14ers because they're 14,000 feet above sea level. And when you're at the trailhead, ready to start your hike, I've never bent down, zipped open my backpack, and just filled it to the rim with stones, right? I didn't do that, because I don't want my backpack to be heavy. But when you're a business that is out of alignment with these rules of growth, that's exactly what you're doing. You're carrying this heavy backpack. And that doesn't keep you from making progress up that mountainside. You can get pretty far. But usually what happens is at some point, the leader says, it's just too hard. I'm going to stop here. I can't seem to get past this level. And so that weight eventually catches up to the organization and stops the growth or slows it dramatically. And by becoming aligned with the rules of growth, essentially what you're doing is you're taking your backpack off, you're unzipping it, and you're taking out all those stones, unloading that, so that you have a light backpack, and it makes growth so much easier. So aligning your stage of growth gives you a light backpack. It positions the organization for growth. The rewilding process, we call this organizational rewilding. So the rewilding process is this really starts off with a business assessment. So this assessment looks at where the organization is, that specific company, where it is, what its characteristics are, what are the challenges that it's experiencing. And it compares it to these rules of growth for the stage that the organization is in. And what it identifies is the areas of misalignment. And coming out of that misalignment, it identifies the top 5 foundational elements of an organization that are needed in the organization for its particular stage of growth, but are not strong enough, are not healthy enough for that particular place of growth. And so it identifies these elements that need to be infused. And that's really what organizational rewilding is about. We have these consulting engagement where we go over a period of 9 to 24 months. We're infusing 3 to 6 elements. And each of these elements has this ripple effect throughout the organization and starts to help reduce the surface issues and challenges and hair on fire situations that are being experienced by the organization, because you're taking care of really the fundamental, the root causes of those challenges. Each of these elements uses and relies upon the ReWild learning system. And this is a multimodal learning technique that's been put together to formulate and help adult learners. It's really geared toward the leader, the CEO, the owner, and the management team, and even down into the staff of the organization. So this system uses video and other kind of learning techniques to help with that. The result is that participants learn the material quickly, they apply it through this process, and that allows the organization to see benefit immediately. You don't have to wait 9 months before you start seeing benefit. You see it even in that first meeting. New ideas are formulated. The organization is starting to get healthier even after that first meeting. The result is that the organization's element, kind of identified by this graphic, the circular graphic here, has all the elements that it needs. It's filled out for that particular stage of growth. So that's the basic process that's used to rewild an organization. I talked a little bit theoretical here, and I think what's helpful to understand the methodology is just to walk through a few examples. I think a few of these, we're going to go through 2 of them, and I suspect that components of this will resonate with you. You've seen businesses act like this, that you're advising. So let's say a CEO has had some success, right? Initial success, they start their businesses and they're at stage 1, startup. They're able to advance to stage 2. They're now 15 people. They're growing. They're in ramp up. Wow, it feels good. I've got this figured out. And it's not like that even takes overnight, right? This could be multiple years to get to here. The organization gets up to stage 3, up to that 20 to 34 range. And for some reason, the wheels get wobbly. The organization just doesn't seem to be able to sustain that. And what happens is the business goes back to stage 2. And this might happen multiple times. This is very similar to the organization I owned and was running. We kind of oscillated between different stages, and I couldn't figure out why. And the reality is, instead of in stage 3, instead of focusing on sales and ramping up the revenue side of things, in stage 3 is really about delegation. And the reason the organization keeps on oscillating is the CEO, the business owner, is using the strategies for stage 2. But stage 3 is different. This is where we say they're distinct, that things change and the old strategies stop working. And that's why the business is stalled out. So in stage 3, the focus is on growing some supervisors, some managers, being able to delegate. And if that's not taking place, the organization is too complex for really that business owner to be running everything. And so at some point, it slips back into stage 2. The only way to make this transition and to really start moving from what we call owner-centric, which is stage 1 to stage 2, into enterprise-centric, which begins in stage 3, that transition is critical, and it's hard for most business owners. You have to follow the rules for stage 3. So this points out that the stages of growth are distinct and the rules change between stages, and what worked previously eventually stops working. The stages of growth helps the CEO understand that those are different stages, and more powerfully, it says how they're different so that the CEO can adjust to the reality of stage 3. Organizational rewilding can remove the barriers that are keeping this business stuck in stage 2. Growing to a stage 3 in 9 to 24 months is very reasonable. And the result is really a remodeled organization. Getting to stage 3 is very important from a valuation standpoint, because this is where the organization starts to become less dependent on the owner. And you all know that the less dependent the organization is on the owner, the more transferable value that exists in that company. So you can see how that's going to multiply the value of the organization. Let me walk through one more scenario quick. We often find CEOs who experience a lot of success and then they hit a wall and things just get hard. It's like they have cement in their boots. And so maybe the CEO has a company that has a great product. They're really good at generating revenue. They get to stage 5 pretty quickly. But if you take an honest look at it, the organization's really functioning, has the maturity of a stage 3 business. And so instead of being in stage 5, where you're integrating departments, or stage 4, where you're creating a professional management team, this organization really hasn't even learned to delegate. And instead of putting in processes and systems, we're still working with the structures that were back in stage 3. And so this business, while it might be looking good on the top end, if you look underneath the covers, there's a lot of things that aren't going well. And so this business owner needs to look to figure out how they can fill this gap. They're at stage 5. They're acting like a stage 3. How do I get there? Well, I've got to develop managers and supervisors to delegate to. I've got to go back to stage 4 and work on my systems and processes so we're scalable. And it's only then that will be matured up to a stage 5. Again, when you look at this business, again, the top line might look good revenue. My guess is profitability isn't all that good. And there's a lot of chaos in the organization because it hasn't matured. It hasn't put these structures in that are needed to keep this organization stable and healthy in stage 5. And if you can do that, which you can do in 9 to 24 months, you're going to actually have a stage 5 business that's mature like a stage 5 business. And again, that's going to look at least like a stage business. And I would argue it's really a remodeled business. And again, the valuation will multiply there. So that you have a little sense, this introduction to organizational rewilding as a methodology, I want to show you how it impacts valuation. So I'm going to use a case study on a welding company. And the owner is kind of a little bit different than your standard scenario, but I think it still works for this audience and for this illustration. The difference here is that this business was just bought by a business owner. The goal was to dramatically grow the business so that it could be sold in 3 to 6 years. So I guess some people might call this a flipping of a business. I don't know if that's really how the CEO was thinking about it, but they just wanted to take a business, grow it, and grow it with the mindset that they wanted to exit in some reasonable amount of time. The business that was purchased had 2.5 full-time equivalent individuals and was under $1 million in revenue for most years. The business owner, the new owner of it, she was not familiar with the construction industry. She's not a welder. And so she wanted to use a roadmap to really help her guide her in this growth because she wanted to grow it rapidly. And she was familiar with the stages of growth methodology, and it helped her in the past. So she wanted to really dig in and apply this more fully in this particular business. And so she started off by submitting and participating in this business assessment that I mentioned as kind of that first step. We call that the ReWild business assessment. And that helped her see where there was misalignment and what elements need to be infused. It became a roadmap for how she worked on her business. I'll just share a few things that came out of that assessment. This is the matrix, and there's a link to that will provide to you, as well as there's a link on the exit planning page. And I encourage you to print that out and have that as a reference. So when she looked at this roadmap, one of the key things on the matrix, it tells you how many managers and executives you need based on your stage of growth. Well, why is that important? Well, if you don't have enough managers, it's very difficult to delegate and then have them be effective as managers, right? So it's a stage one business starting off. One of the key things she realized is that as a stage one business, ideally it has 0 managers, but in stage 2, the next place the organization was wanting to get there quickly, she needed 1 to 2 managers, and she didn't have any. So that impacted how she was recruiting, how she looked at her staff, and realizing that she had to develop a couple managers very quickly. If she hadn't realized that, she could have gotten up to stage 2 and been stuck there, probably fell back to stage 1 because she didn't have that support in that larger organization. The second area of misalignment had to do with gates of focus. Gates of focus is the idea that there are 3 things that are important to an organization and that can be a gate to go through for growth. These things are people, process, and profit. Those items are always important, but what our research shows, there's a best practice to prioritize those given your stage of growth. In stage 1, the ideal is number 1 is profit. You can't get out of stage 1 without profit. So that's your primary gate of growth. People is second. Every person you add is a significant part of your team, and you have to hire for fit and profit. You still have to process. You don't need as much process in stage 1 because you're still trying to figure out what you're doing. Compare that to the CEO's perspective on this, and that is people are number 1. She's not a welder, so she was saying, okay, these people are the most important thing. Process, the prior owner had no process. I got to get process in place. Profit, well, if I do the first 2, profit will come. And that's not an unreasonable mindset, but the reality is this misalignment on this focus means a lot. If this organization doesn't focus on generating profitable revenue, it will never grow. It'll never get out of stage 1. And she can't add the people that she wants to add to grow the organization. So this was a point of misalignment that the methodology showed her. A third item is called 3 faces of a leader. This is a dimension dealing specifically with the CEO, and it helps identify how much time or energy should be allocated to 3 faces that you can wear. You can wear the visionary face, where you're setting the vision and communicating that to the organization, where you're working on the business instead of just in the business. That's the visionary face. You can wear the manager face. The manager face is overseeing people that are doing the work and managing them well. And thirdly is the specialist face. You wear that when you roll up your sleeves and you're actually doing the work. Ideally, in stage 1, the CEO is spending 40% visionary, 10% manager, and 50% specialist. This CEO had a big gap in where she was spending her energy, and that's in large part because she wasn't a welder. So she's like, okay, I can't weld. I need to spend my time as visionary and manager, and I'm not going to worry about specialists. But this misalignment wasn't healthy for the organization because there's more than a bit to a business than operations. And so where she could use her specialty skills and be that specialist is more on the business development side and also on support services, where she had a lot of experience on billing and collecting and HR and those kinds of things. So it helped her see that she can still spend 50% as a specialist. It's just different than what she was picturing the specialist to be. She's not going to put down her hood and start welding. That's just not kind of her way of running the business. So these were 3 areas where having the roadmap provided specific misalignment, identified that misalignment, and gave her a roadmap to follow. Additionally, the assessment identified 5 areas that she really needed to work on as far as the business, getting these foundational structures in place. And I'm not going to go in detail into what each of these is, but the names are probably enough for you to get a sense for them. The business model, how the business was architected so that it was resilient and profitable. Organizational structure, making sure everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, where there's a functional org chart that shows how people report to each other and how they're going to advance in the organization and have titles that are meaningful. Brand and core values, this defines what the company's promises to the market, what their customers should be expecting, and the promise to the team, their core values. How are they going to interact as a team? Business development structure, remember, profit is the gate of focus for stage one. So put in energy in making sure business development has the structures in place to generate leads, turn those leads into revenue, and keep the revenue coming from existing customers. And a one-to-one process where supervisors are meeting regularly with their subordinates. So you open up lines of communication. This was everything about the business was changing. So being able to hear from the lowest rank up to say what's working, what's not working, and hear that in a timely manner was really important for the organization to improve and to grow, to be able to sustain growth. So those are the 5 elements that this organization needed to work on. Infusing these elements and working on these areas of misalignment took tremendous effort and commitment. This was on top of her trying to learn the industry. But the point is, it gave her a roadmap. It wasn't, okay, I need to do what? It was, oh, here's specific things I need to work on. And the results speak for themselves. These graphs show values at the time of purchase versus 2 years later. Annual revenue has quadrupled. Number of employees has tripled from 3.5 to 11. And probably from a valuation standpoint, the most important is that sellers' discretionary earnings has increased as well. It's tripled as well. And it's hit that $1 million mark, right? And so that's a key threshold. And I would argue that this business that was bought for $800,000 is now worth $3 to $5 million. And that's in 2 years. So you see how this multiplier effect can really impact a business. So when we talk about how does it impact, multiply the business value, it provides this clear roadmap of where the company is, where it's been, and the gaps that weren't taken care of getting to the current stage. And it shows where you need to go and how things are going to change. It's very powerful in allowing an organization to proactively prepare for that next stage. Becoming aligned with the rules of growth, remove these hidden barriers. You could go for years, decades, not seeing these hidden barriers, but the methodology makes it very clear that you have to be clear on your gates of focus and your 3 faces of a leader and all those other 8 dimensions. And what that allows the organization to do is not just grow, but grow sustainably in a way that is methodical, and it doesn't end up with them going down dead ends or hitting roadblocks. And that creates a very strong story, right? A growing business always sells for more than a flat or declining business. Infusing these specific elements creates these enduring structures. I talked about how this isn't focused while the CEO is involved, obviously critically with that. These are structures that belong to the organization and get passed along to the new owner so that it increases the transferable value. And just a quick thing on that. I mean, how many businesses that you're working with have a strong business model, have clear brand and core values, have clear org structure, have business development structure, and have a one-to-one process? Those are just 5 elements. How many of your businesses have all 5 of those? My guess is very few. So you can see how adding those really does impact the value. And one of the key things that comes out of infusing the elements is this idea that it takes ideas that are primarily in the business owner's mind and documents them, whether that's procedures, structures, or strategies. Again, that is now transferable instead of it being in the mind of the CEO and leaving the enterprise when the exit is done. So hopefully I've if you're interested in using organizational rewilding for your exit planning clients, there's really two main options. The first, you could choose to become certified in organizational rewilding, just like you are certified in the BEI exit planning methodology. It's just another bag of tools that you bring to your clients. Of course, you can generate more revenue, you build a bond with your business owners, and the business sells for more and is easier to sell. A second option is to connect with our network. We've got a global network of advisors who would be glad to come alongside as a specialist in this area and help you with your business. Again, if you go to exitplanning.rewildgroup.com, you'll have access to those two options, and we'll put some links in the chat for you there as well. So if you're interested in just kind of learning more about the methodology before you go to either of those steps, a great resource is our 2-book series on Amazon. The first one is the Stages of Growth series, and that there's a book for each of the 7 stages. And this is where I'd recommend you start. You might say, well, what stage of book should I read? I would just take an existing client, kind of figure out what stage they're in, and that's the stage that you should start with. The books are written to be read in about an hour, and it'll really give you insight into where your client is, and you might even share the book with that client. Within those stage books, it'll also say what are the elements that are typically needed in that particular business, and that's what the second set of books goes into, is each of those elements. So I'd start with the stage book if you want to learn through that mechanism. Okay. Just to wrap up, we have some specials here. We appreciate BEI and our relationship with them. And so anybody participating today, whether live or on the recording, is eligible for 50% off our initial certification. So you save $750 there. Maybe even more importantly, though, we want to offer all the listeners today a free ReWild business assessment for one of their clients. This is a great way for you to try out the methodology at no cost to you or your client. It takes them a little time. It's about 20 to 30 minutes to submit. And then we spend about an hour going through the results with you. But this would be a great way for you to see, how does this really show what's going on in the business? And just take advantage of that before the end of April. And we'll have details on that page on how to access those 2 offers. Okay, we have some time left for a few questions. And again, if you had a question come up, you haven't submitted it, please use the Q&A button to submit those. And I encourage you to ask your questions. There's probably somebody else that has the same question that's on the line today. So go ahead and get those submitted, and we'll open it up for some initial questions.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Matt, for the presentation. And we have had 3 questions come in as you were speaking. So I'll just go ahead and give them to you in the order that they came in.
Okay, perfect.
And again, like you said, if anyone else has a question, feel free to add it. But the first one is, what are the sources of your research?
Great question. Our resources, the sources for our research has been really a series of research by the original author of the methodology that has continued since I've acquired the IP. So we're just constantly surveying and interacting with businesses in a structured manner that help us kind of see if anything has changed in these stages and things like that. So the heavy research was in the first decade or so, where I was really trying to understand where these stages are. It was really the discovery that the number of employees was such an important component in understanding why businesses get stuck or are able to navigate growth. So that was kind of the foundational research. And then we've continued to do that in part through our ReWild business assessments. We're continuously getting input from businesses to see if that misalignment in the rules still apply today. And so that's really the source of the research.
Okay, thank you. Next question, why have you chosen the number of employees as a measurement for stage of growth? Are there other measures?
There's really, I would say, 3 common ways to try to categorize businesses or kind of see this journey. of businesses, and the most common is revenue. So you see methodologies that are based on revenue. You also see just kind of how long, or just kind of sense for how mature the organization is. You look at it and say, well, you're acting like this, so that's what you're in. And of course, our methodology, where we look at the number of employees. What our research found is that there was a higher correlation between the number of employees than these other characteristics of really understanding what stage a business is in. And I'll just give you an example. Revenue, while it's not a bad measurement, the reality is that if you have a construction company that's doing $1 million in business, and you have, say, a consulting business that's doing $1 million in business, those two organizations are quite different. And the reason is that a construction company, a third to a half of their revenue is coming from materials that they use. They don't need people to generate that $500,000. So the number of people in that construction business is significantly lower. And it goes, that gap gets bigger the bigger the organization gets. So a $5 million construction company and a $5 million consulting company are two different companies. That's not the best demarcation for what stage the business is in.
And the last question that we have is regarding putting profit first in your example. What about all the models that are focused on revenue growth, et cetera, are supported by a cash burn structure, and profit at the front end is not necessary?
Yeah, and I would say, for any set of rules, there can be exceptions. So, if you have private equity at the beginning, profit is probably not as big of a focus. But if you think about profit as saying, if you can't create a product that the market is willing to purchase at a price above what it costs you, that's profit, right? If you can't do that, at some point, your business can't continue to exist. I would suggest that private equity allows you to avoid that in some ways, at least theoretically, for a period of time. But at some point, you have to be able to sell a product or a service for more than it costs you. And so it's really that mindset in stage one of you have to be able to generate revenue that provides profit, that supports the growth of the organization. Again, you can offset that. You can say, well, I'm going to get capital from another source, and that will kind of fill the gap between revenue and expenses. Okay, then think of that as part of your profit story, right? So instead of having to grow bootstrap off your own profit, you're instead bringing in funding that fills that gap. So I would say that's the same thing. You're having to put a lot of energy to get that money in. That's like spending energy to make a profitable sale to a customer.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have, unless anyone wants to chime in at the last minute here.
Great. Appreciate your attendance. I suspect our conversation today stirred up maybe some new ideas, maybe some exciting ideas on how you could help your clients dramatically increase the value of their business prior to exiting, right? So that's step 3. We have a tangible system to put into there, and we hope that you'll consider either becoming a certified rewilder, that would be great, or just connecting with somebody in our network, just another specialist that you bring to the table, like you bring an accountant, a financial planner, an attorney. You can have a growth specialist come alongside you to help your client. So either of those ways, your client benefits from the system. And again, be sure to visit exitplanning.rewildgroup.com. We put all the resources that we've talked about today there. And so that'll be a kind of a single place to go. So I want to thank everyone for your time and attention, and reach out to us. As Maddie said, she'll be sending out an email with the video link. There'll be some contact information, a link to exit planning and those types of things. Just reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you.